Good evening, my children. I am Countess Dier, and welcome to the Halloween special of Beauties and Beasts, the podcast for all things beautiful and beastly. Oh boy, I love this holiday so much. I mean, who wouldn't love Halloween? It's a time where we celebrate all things related to fear, death, and moral ambiguity. And what better time of the year to talk about beasts? So, we're not really talking about Beauty and the Beast per se, we're talking about a certain trope that kind of stems from Beauty and the Beast. And that's vampire romance. Been very popular in the last decade, well, with Twilight and the Vampire Diaries and True Blood. Vampire has a crush on a human teenager, most of the time it's a teenager, and they're struggling with their difficulty of whether or not one of them should turn into a vampire or the other should become mortal somehow. If anything, it's actually a pretty easy fix. Well, let's just say some of us got a little tired of this trope after a while and we steered from vampires to zombies. But who is to blame for this vampire romance trope? It's Irish author Bram Stoker, who wrote the 1897 novel Dracula. And we will talk about Dracula and why this is not a Beauty and the Beast story, and certainly not a vampire romance. Yeah, you heard me right. If you've seen all the movies, you think of Dracula as a story of this immortal monster who goes to England to seduce this English woman to become his #1 immortal bride. Well, that is actually not how the original story goes. So how did this really inspire a romance trope in vampire fantasy? First off, this was not really meant to be a romance, but a gothic horror novel that was inspired from folklore from Eastern Europe surrounding vampires. And also inspired in part by a Romanian ruler known as Vlad III or Vlad Dracula, otherwise famously known as Vlad the Impaler, known for impaling his victims on stakes and just leaving them out there on display. So I just want you to throw everything you know about Dracula, if you've only seen the movies, out the window right now. And before we get into the plot summary, I'd like to give a shout out to my generous and loyal patrons, Duskwing Dragon, Satuhana, and Tyrannosaurus Venom. Thank you for your continuing support, and remember that true beauty comes from the kindness you show to others, and your kindness will not go unrewarded. If you want to help keep this podcast going and help me to fix my external hard drive and also help me get more rewards for patrons and get some of these rewards yourself, and also help raise money to get more guests, then become a patron today and pledge a certain amount of money a month. You don't even have to pledge that much. You can even just pledge $1 a month, and that would be enough to help raise money in the long run. You can do this by clicking the green button in the right-hand corner of the screen or follow the link in the description below. As a side note, some of the patrons right now are listening on a Skype call. You can actually listen to these recordings live if you pledge at least $10 a month. And you are allowed to post comments such as Satuhana saying that I'm so funny. Thank you so much. I will get to all your questions towards the end of the episode. Alright, so now let's talk about Dracula. Since I already dictated that this is not a Beauty and the Beast story, I will not be going into my traditional 5-act summary. And also because the story is actually not that neatly constructed. Dracula is actually told in a series of journal entries and news articles, which kind of makes the plot somewhat linear, yet kind of goes back and forth in a few places, just so you know what each of the important characters are up to. And the whole point is for you to piece together what is going on in these journal entries and these articles. Because you don't even hear from Dracula's perspective, just from the other characters who are interacting with Dracula. Alright, so in the beginning, we start with the journal from Jonathan Harker, an English lawyer who travels to Transylvania to assist a powerful nobleman named Count Dracula in buying an estate in England. And all the villagers there hear where Jonathan Harker is going, and they warn him not to go there, for Castle Dracula is said to be cursed, and there are said to be vampires around at night. And Jonathan Harker, being English and a Protestant, does not really believe in these sort of superstitions. However, he does accept a crucifix given to him by an old lady, just to make her feel better. So Jonathan arrives at the Count's castle, and the Count welcomes him with open arms. For those of you who've seen some of the movies, Count Dracula's actually not that attractive at first. He's described as being somewhat elderly and thin, having a very pale face, red eyes, pointed ears, and sharp teeth. Honestly, Jonathan, this should have been a big tip-off in the beginning. So while Jonathan is staying with Dracula and helping him buy his new estate in England, he starts noticing things like the fact that the Count never eats, he only sees him at night, and he asks him to write letters to his friends at home, saying that he will return in a few days and to date them specifically, even though it's not the right date. And Jonathan's like, okay, so why am I putting these dates in advance? And he slowly starts to realize that Harker is a prisoner and that he might not leave this castle alive. And that the point of these letters is so his friends at home won't worry about where he is. And then one night, while Harker is somewhat asleep, he is attacked by 3 strange, pale women. They try to kiss him, and they try to sink their fangs into his throat. But then Dracula shows up and gets them to back off, saying that Harker belongs to him. And then Harker finds Dracula asleep in a box, and finds out he is suddenly youthful. Finally understanding that Dracula is something other than human, Harker tries to escape, and it's actually not really clear how he escapes, just that he's trying to climb down the castle walls, but the journal cuts off there. So one can only assume that he didn't really have time to write about his escape because he was in the middle of it. And so we cut to a series of letters between Mina Murray, who is Jonathan Harker's fiancée back in England, and her good friend Lucy Westenra. Let's talk a little bit about these 2 women here. Mina is an educated young woman who's learning shorthand so that when she is married to Harker, she will work as a secretary and take notes for him, just so that she can be of some use to them when they are married and she doesn't have to just sit around at home. See, now there's a potential partner. And then there's Lucy, who is in the middle of some romantic drama. She receives 3 marriage proposals in one day. Man, this girl gets around. Her suitors include Dr. John Seward, who runs an asylum, Quincy Morris, an American who is into horses, and Arthur Holmwood, the person that Lucy accepts. And then we get to Mina's journal, describing her visit to Lucy's home. And while she is visiting her, there are news articles about a Russian ship that wrecks in the port of England, with all the crew missing and the captain dead at the wheel. And not just at the wheel, but his hands are tied to the wheel. The cargo consists of 50 boxes that were sent from Castle Dracula. Gee, I wonder what happened to the crew there. A few days after the shipwreck, Lucy starts sleepwalking. When Mina finds that she is out of bed, she goes and discovers Lucy in a cemetery with a strange figure hunched over her. But Mina, rather than calling for help, goes right up to Lucy and the figure and scares the figure away. Seriously, this is a really brave girl here. Shortly thereafter, Lucy starts falling ill. She becomes pale and she has 2 mysterious tiny red marks on her throat, for which Mina and Dr. Seward cannot explain. So Dr. Seward, who is still pining for Lucy, and though he's not marrying her, wants to help her in any way he can, calls his old mentor, a Dutchman called Professor Abraham Van Helsing. While Mina wants to stay by Lucy's side during her sickness, she receives word that Harker is suffering from brain fever in Budapest. Of course, this brain fever is probably just shock from the vampire attack. And so Mina leaves Lucy and goes to Jonathan, and they marry over in Budapest. Shortly after Mina leaves, Van Helsing arrives. And after examining Lucy, he decorates her chambers with garlic and orders that the window be closed at all times. Without really explaining to Dr. Seward what is going on, or explaining to Lucy, or explaining to the mother what is going on. Mostly the mother, because she is suffering from a weak heart, and Van Helsing fears the shock will kill her. Unfortunately, this backfires on him as the mother, unknowingly, makes things worse by removing the garlic from the room and leaving the window open for air. Yeah, this is why you should really tell people what's going on, no matter how crazy. And so the work is undone, and Lucy is put through a series of blood transfusions. First from her fiancé, next from Seward, next from Quincy, who is also still loyal to Lucy, and then from Van Helsing. But things just keep getting worse, and even Quincy's starting to notice, nobody needs that many blood transfusions in such a short amount of time. Something's wrong with her. But then one day, the men are caught off guard, and a wolf breaks into the house, scaring the mother to death, and then proceeding to kill Lucy. After the funeral and everybody mourns for Lucy's and her mother's deaths, there are reports going around the town of a beautiful lady attacking children at night, not killing them but leaving strange red marks on their throats and some of their blood missing. Van Helsing concludes that this must be Lucy, who is now among the undead. And after much convincing, Van Helsing takes all of Lucy's previous loves to the tomb to drive a stake through Lucy's heart and cut off her head, so that her soul may be free and she can't hurt anyone anymore and she can be truly dead. Afterwards, all 4 men pledge to avenge Lucy and destroy Dracula for good. So the Harkers return, now married, to England and join forces with the others to destroy Dracula, after putting their swords together and realizing that they are after the same person. And Mina and Van Helsing pretty much become best friends at first sight, Van Helsing describing Mina as the perfect person who has the mind of a man and the heart of a woman. Mina helps collect the journal entries and all the articles in order to piece a whole account together and make sense of things. And after a big conference, the men decide that from now on they will leave Mina out of the affair, because as a woman she'll be too emotional and also might get in danger and end up like Lucy. Seriously, did they learn nothing from Lucy? I mean, Lucy and the mom got killed because they didn't tell them anything. What do you think's gonna happen to Mina? Just saying. So while the men are tracking down the boxes of earth, which are what keep Dracula safe in his New England home, Mina, left alone at Dr. Seward's asylum, starts growing weary and very, very pale. And while Jonathan takes note of this, he thinks she's just upset for being left out of the loop. And then we soon learn that Renfield, who is a mental patient at the asylum, obsessed with eating flies and small animals, he starts getting spiders to catch the flies and then proceeding to eat the spiders and then getting birds to eat the spiders and so on and so forth. We discover that this lunatic has been letting Dracula into the asylum because vampires cannot enter a home without permission from one of the residents. And since Renfield is a patient, he's technically a resident. And so the men one night find Dracula forcing Mina to drink his blood. And after much relation from Mina, we discover that this is not the first time. And this means that because he drank her blood and she drank his blood, this will turn her into a vampire. And now a word from our sponsor and patron, Tyrannosaurus Venom, who'd like to promote an audio drama he'd like to make into a reality called Family of a Lifetime. A crossover between the popular cartoon series My Little Pony and the Jurassic Park franchise. For those that haven't read the story on FimFiction, a website for My Little Pony-based fanfiction, the basic summary of the tale is that Scootaloo is living an abused and tired life with her controlling parents. They bring her down every day and ridicule her on the smallest mistakes. The only one who seems to care is her big sister, but not even Rainbow Dash can help her out of this predicament. Desperate for an escape from her torment, Scootaloo ends up lost in the Everfree Forest. That night, she is ambushed by a pack of timberwolves. But a pair of dinosaurs intervene and save Scootaloo from the pack hunters. The encounter brings them into her life, and they start to take on the role of loyal protectors. Their arrival will put her on the path to true happiness or even greater troubles. Auditions are still going on, so for any artists or actors that would like to be a part of this project, send your submissions to venomwolf99@gmail.com. Be sure to also check out Tyrannosaurus Venom's YouTube channel, which consists of videos relating to My Little Pony and Jurassic Park. Links will be available in the description below. And thank you again, Tyrannosaurus Venom, for your continuing support. Alright, so back to the story. In order to slow Mina's transformation, Van Helsing gives her a crucifix to wear. And she starts to discover that at a certain time of day, right when the sun is setting, she can see through Dracula's eyes, and she uses this to help the men destroy him in figuring out where he is at the moment, and where his boxes of earth are kept. So the men destroy the boxes one by one, and the Count, left to only one box, flees back to Transylvania, and the men and Mina follow him. Van Helsing and Mina arrive at the castle, confronting and killing Dracula's 3 brides. And the others vanquish the Count in a final showdown. Mina is saved, but Quincy Morris dies, and the Harkers live a long, happy life and name their son Quincy. So yeah, let me start getting into what all the movies got wrong. There is no romantic connection whatsoever between Mina and Dracula. He didn't transform her because he loved her or because he merely thought she was pretty. He transformed her out of revenge and spite of the men who were trying to kill him. I mean, sure, she was probably going to end up like those three brides, but it was still not really out of romantic intention. And Mina feels no romantic attraction towards Dracula either. For one thing, she is married. Married, okay? To a guy who's actually pretty loyal to her. And even without that, the film adaptations get the plot of the book all wrong. I'd say the closest version I've seen is the 1931 film, though that is not saying much. For one thing, they changed the plot a lot. Like, they have Renfield going to the castle instead of Harker, which doesn't make much sense because Renfield is still given a crucifix and therefore should not have been attacked. And Mina is made Dr. Seward's daughter for some reason. They leave out the whole romantic drama. And like in all the Dracula adaptations I've seen, Mina is dumbed down significantly. The whole point is that she is strong-willed enough not to immediately fall victim to Dracula, and while there is a pull because of the supernatural spell, she overcomes all that. That's also a problem I had with the stage musical. Yes, this was adapted into a musical, which was a total flop. Though I will say the music was really good, just the songs were too beautiful to belong in the Dracula story. Though I will say how it was interesting how they changed the ending, so Dracula willingly went into the sunlight to die so he could be free and so Mina could be free of him. Would have made a lot more sense if they had actually shown any romantic connection at all. But why does this keep happening? Why do a lot of Dracula adaptations insert a romantic subplot between Dracula and Mina? You know, maybe it is to give Dracula some emotional depth and to show that he's not entirely a killing machine. There is one line when he is commanding the brides not to kill Jonathan. They say that he has never loved, and he tells them, "You all know that I have loved." Perhaps it was from this one little quote that people who later recreated the character Dracula thought that maybe there is more to him that meets the eye. I mean, I'm all for that. Just, Mina would never fall for that. She wouldn't. So, if this is not a Beauty and the Beast story, and not a vampire romance, then what is this story? Well, it's a gothic horror. It's meant for scares and adventure. It's introducing vampire folklore to Western Europe. It really was more popular in Eastern Europe. You know, Transylvania, Romania, Hungary. It is a story of superstition versus science. Or rather, not that they are against each other, but that they can actually work together. In fact, the 1931 movie used a quote that really describes the theme of the book really well. This is something that Van Helsing says, "The superstition of yesterday can become the scientific reality of today." And that's true. With our growing, changing world, especially in the late 19th century, we learned so much about the natural world that seems to debunk many old superstitions and religious beliefs, but actually, this doesn't mean that science totally debunks religion. They can actually work together, like you can be religious and believe in science at the same time. I mean, as one example, God created doctors, doctors created medicine, God and science work in tandem. Just an example, if you don't believe in God, that's fine. It's also a story of good versus evil. You know, Dracula being evil and the humans being good. So it's kind of a Beauty versus Beast story. Or really, in Mina's case, it's a story of overcoming trauma that can come from sexual assault. At least this is my interpretation. I mean, Dracula goes into her room, takes her blood in her sleep, and then forces her to drink his blood. It kind of gives the image of rape. After the event, Mina is in total shock. She is shaking and she is muttering to herself, "Unclean, unclean." That's kind of the standard feeling of women after they've been violated. And I've had friends go through similar experiences, so this is really something I've seen in other people. And by the way, props to the men for not immediately blaming her for getting attacked by Dracula. Good on them. They actually blame themselves for not being there to protect her. Yeah, it's a pretty emotional moment. But Mina, though she is totally traumatized by this, and understandably so, as she is very strong and determined, she steps up to see that her attacker never hurts anyone ever again. She fights Dracula's power, uses her connection against him, resists the pull from the brides when they call her sister, and she plays a crucial role in Dracula's destruction. This girl is seriously awesome, and this was in the late 19th century. It's really sad that such a great character is not done justice on later adaptations on the silver screen or on stage. And why? I don't know, I can only assume it's sex appeal or the misogynistic wish not to see women in a strong leading role. For the 30s movie, I kind of understand, but today? The whole point of the story is that the men in the book see that they must keep women in the loop. When they left Mina out of the affair just because they were afraid she'd get more emotional, this was an example of benevolent sexism. It's not that they thought that she couldn't handle it, they just didn't want her to get hurt because she was a woman like Lucy. And benevolent sexism is pretty much just as bad. And Mina, she wanted to help, but she only sat back and didn't say anything because her husband didn't defend her. And as a result, she didn't wish to talk, and she didn't even bother telling anybody else about her weird dreams and how she was feeling weaker and weaker because she didn't think her opinion mattered. It really seemed that Stoker understood women. That we are aware of our hearts and minds, we are emotional but not weak, and emotion really helps us overcome trauma. So the moral of this story is tell your friends everything, no matter how crazy, though you might want to take it slowly and one step at a time. Trust in your friends. They are more capable and understanding than you think. Don't underestimate women, or anybody for that matter. And Dracula is not romantic. Not even capitalized romantic. Alright, so a few announcements. I have started a new miniseries called Beastly Reads, which is a series of book reviews with Beauty and the Beast themes, or are just beastly in the sense that they are creepy, available only to patrons of $10 a month or more. The book I reviewed this week was an anthology of stories inspired by Frankenstein called In the Shadow of Frankenstein, which is available now. Alright, so if there are any questions about this episode or this series in general, you can ask them now. Just send a text. For the rest of you listening, you can listen to these recordings live too if you pledge $10 a month or more. Okay, Tyrannosaurus Venom said, I never knew Dracula had such a different past from what everything has painted him out to be. Yeah, like I said, the movies get a lot of things wrong. Like, they either make Dracula kind of too romantic, or they can make him kind of goofy. Don't get me wrong, I love Hotel Transylvania, but it really doesn't relate much to the book. Except maybe in Hotel Transylvania 3 when they have a new take on Van Helsing. Though, he's a much more intelligent and less, weird character than they make him out to be in Hotel Transylvania. And Satuhana asks, what brought the series along with Bride of Discord and Daughter of Discord in the beginning? Could you clarify that, please? Okay, I kind of thought they really tied together and was wondering what inspired them before starting your YouTube and PodBean channel. Oh, so like what inspired the series? Well, I've always been a fan of Beauty and the Beast. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because it's the only fairy tale where the main couple doesn't fall in love at first sight. It's not because that they're beautiful. It's because they have a lot in common and their love grows over time. It just attracts me the most. It's probably why I kept writing fan fiction based on that sort of idea, including Bride of Discord. And when I took that seminar in college on Beauty and the Beast, I wanted to do more with it. There was so much we didn't talk about in that seminar, like we didn't talk about Dracula, one guy did talk about Shrek, but we didn't talk about it in depth. There's just so many versions of Beauty and the Beast out there, I wanted to talk about them all, or as many as I can anyway. And when I wrote Bride of Discord, that was me fulfilling my Fluttershy and Discord fantasies of My Little Pony. I just wanted to see them in a Beauty and the Beast setting, and while some fanfic writers had attempted that, none of them were really completed. I just wanted to do my own spin on it, and I didn't want to copy Disney too much. And Satuhana said, I love that whole series and this podcast. I'm just a huge fan of all of it, just saying. Well, thank you. Well, does anyone else have just questions? Anything else they'd like to know about Dracula or the series? Or maybe some future episodes? And Tyrannosaurus Venom asks, what's the next subject after Dracula? Well, actually, I was going to mention this at the very end. I'm keeping it a secret for now, but I can tell you who's going to be co-hosting in the next episode. Two very famous YouTube personalities, especially in the My Little Pony fandom, Magpiepony and TheLostNarrator. Yep, if you are also a Brony and Pegasister like me, you will know who these two are, especially Magpiepony with her Pinky Tail series, and she actually did her own adaptation of Beauty and the Beast called Egghead and the Beast with Twilight in the beauty role and the Beast in... I'm not going to spoil her episode. It's actually really funny. Okay, well, if that is all, then I'll just leave one more note. I'm really hoping to get more guests for this podcast, and some of them might want some compensation. So you can help me pay those guests and get more patron rewards, such as more gifts. You can become a patron right now, just pledging $1 a month. It doesn't have to be that much. But you can gain access to new episodes, listen to new episode previews. You can join our closed Skype chat. You can get complimentary gifts such as mugs and t-shirts. Or if you're not able to help in the long run, you could just buy the merchandise at redbubble.com. Alright, so I will see you in 2 weeks. And remember, when you're out on Halloween night, to watch behind your back. Because somebody, especially somebody with fangs, might be stalking you. Okay, now I'm sounding too creepy. Happy Halloween, everybody!